Welcome to the Soccer Geeks podcast, hosted by Jason Barbato.
Hello everyone, it's Marissa and Jason. We're back for another episode of Soccer Geeks, and I'm really excited to talk to our guest today, and I'll let you introduce him in a little bit, but it kind of brings back everything full circle, which when you're involved in soccer, whether it's at the youth level or semi-pro, you kind of maintain those connections. And luckily, we have the opportunity to talk to someone we worked with over 5 years ago. Or I would say I worked with him.
Yeah.
You worked. He was involved in the team that we worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
We were working and it
Yes.
worked. Yeah, you know what's great is one of the wonderful things that we've been able to and experiences we've been able to have, Marissa, is to work with collegiate and youth players and to kind of have our own rendition of Boys to Men on the podcast today. So it's pretty exciting. So I'm so pumped to see some of the players that we got an opportunity to work with make a big impact in the world, not just on the soccer field, but on the sidelines as well. And so I'm real excited to have a former player of ours and all around wonderful young man, Joe LaCasto, is going to come on the show today. So Joe has his bachelor's in health and wellness promotion. He also just finished his MA in management. And he is the current assistant head coach at University at North Carolina, Asheville. So why don't you go ahead and bring Joe on the show?
Hello,
there
Joe.
He is. What's
Hello.
up, Joe? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well.
Thanks for
How
joining
about
us.
yourself?
We're doing awesome, man. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to have a conversation. We think it's going to be great catching up with you and to hear about how your experiences over your playing career have really affected and helped shape you to the coach that you're being molded into. So thanks, and we're excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation and talking soccer.
Thanks a ton, buddy. Appreciate it.
I'll be back towards the end, and you guys enjoy your conversation. I'll be here behind the scenes.
Thanks. You're the best, Marissa. We appreciate you. So, Joe, talked about a little bit of your credentials there from just a degree standpoint. Can you kind of give a little bit of understanding of just what, your bachelor's and your master's degrees that you've had kind of equipped you for the role that you now have yourself as a coach?
Yeah, 100%. So my undergraduate degree was in health and wellness promotion here at UNC Asheville, and that was more based on the scientific side, kind of health and wellness, also diving into the public health kind of sphere as well. So I took a lot of classes, pathophysiology, strength and conditioning classes that help kind of take me down a road where if I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach, a PT, something as that aspect. And then I also took a lot of classes more towards mental health, public health, policy making, and things like that. After my undergraduate degree, I took a year to dive into coaching before I went to a different university just up the road and did a master's in management program, which was more on the business side of things. A lot of management, leadership things, but also more on the business economic side, which was obviously a shift for me from my undergraduate degree, but something that was, very unique and helped prepare me more overall for kind of coaching and the business side of it as well.
Yeah. What does that look like? The business. I mean, I get the physical side and the physio side, from a coaching standpoint, right? But even being in a college context, what does that business management side look like? Is it scholarships and budgets? Is it, submitting a budget to the, the athletic directors at what you need for travel? What does that look like?
Yeah, scholarship, budget, fundraising, all of that. Submitting things to the AD, that I think was my biggest, shock when I went into the college coaching was how much outside work goes into it. Not just the soccer side, but the scholarship, the budget, making sure simple things as we have food for post-game, food for pre-game. How much is that going to cost? The buses, or are we taking vans? What's the cost, between the two, things like that. So, and then obviously the management side also plays in making presentations to show the athletic director on, maybe it's some facilities that need to be updated or things that other schools in the conference do that we would like to, steal a little bit, and making proposals and things like that.
Yeah, it's funny because that's all the stuff that we were doing behind the scene when we had the NPSL and USL PDL2 team, whatever we were working on. We didn't. I didn't have the luxury, Joe, of having a college course in it. We were just kind of thrown in it. And it's funny is thinking of the other teams even back in the day. I remember another local team. They would take their teams to Taco Bell, after games, or that was like their pregame food or something like that. And we always tried to take real good care of you guys. And, one of the things that, back then and even now makes me just so proud is, we wanted to equip the players that played with us and for us, not just for life on the soccer field, but for life after. And so I was wondering if you might be able to share just a little bit about, what that was like for you, playing in the system we currently have in the country, right? Not on a pro contract or anything like that, but you decided to go the college route. There's this system in place with kind of tier 3/tier 4 clubs across the country with, NPSL or USL2 that affords opportunities for college players to kind of stay in shape and, and also be a little bit showcased on a national stage. Just from your experience, choosing that path in college, can you kind of talk about what that experience was like for you as a player, a collegiate player, kind of working in the system and mechanisms that our country has set up?
Yeah, so I grew up, playing soccer from a young age. I grew up just playing club. I never played in the DA. Had a few opportunities, but played for some really good club teams throughout. And when I was looking to go to a university, there was quite a lot of options. And at first it was overwhelming for me and my family trying to, not that I had a bunch of options, but trying to figure out, okay, these are schools that interest me and they have kind of certain boxes that I like in terms of academics, athletics, and also school size, things of that nature. So once I was able to narrow down, the schools that I was really interested, trying to get recruited there was a whole different process, and trying to kind of do it on my own because I never had anybody in my family do it. My parents, they were going through soccer when I was. So everything we were doing was a learning experience, and then trying to play, club and go to these showcases and managing, how do I get to a school that I want to go to that also wants me. So not just saying I'm going to go anywhere in the country or I'm going to go to any possible school because I want to play, but finding a school that has a career that can set me up for my future career. So going to college in North Carolina was obviously a massive kind of culture shock for me, culture difference. And I had some friends from back home and some people I knew that came out to North Carolina, in similar times, which made the transition easy. But the college system was definitely different. And the USL League 2, the NPSL, figuring out how to navigate those in the summers between colleges was very interesting. And I had to lean on a lot of players, or a lot of people, a lot of coaches, former coaches, current coaches at the time that helped me navigate, teams and how to get on a team, which teams would be beneficial for me and what kind of systems and environments they're going to provide. But overall, it was a good experience. And, now looking back, I've got to see a lot of different environments between college and, summer league setups. And I can take kind of the things I want to and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for your career from a playing standpoint, there was kind of a moment for you where you kind of had to realize, like, all right, like I'm not going to end up getting into the system as far as, playing at a higher level or things like that. And so, what was it for you that kind of kicked off this pivot into coaching?
Yeah. So I always had two goals, and, I actually wanted to be a professional. I think as every young kid in America does, or that plays any sport, has that dream to be a professional. But on the flip side, I always knew I wanted to get coaching, probably from around high school. Interesting enough, I had some very good role models, conversation with my parents. I knew I wanted to get into coaching. And so it was always in the back of my mind that the transition would be from playing to coaching. So as I went through it and, played on some good summer teams, played for college, had some ups and downs and a few good years, a few not so good years, individually did well. I started to realize that the player I was never going to be an MLS player. I was never going to make it in Europe. I thought, they were coming out of college and out of some USL League Two, NPSL teams. I thought, maybe I could make it in League One, maybe the championship, maybe go, overseas to some lower levels, maybe in a Scandinavian country. But as I was coming out and just realizing my pathway and, I knowing I wanted to get into coaching and knowing the opportunities that I had and the opportunities that I also didn't have, I realized that it was just time to kind of hang up the boots in a sense in the competitive way and take that next step into coaching, just knowing that, I wasn't going to be in the MLS. I wasn't going to be in a big league in Europe, and realizing that was it worth, a few more years of just chasing contract to contract, playing in random parts of the world and, at a lower level and barely scraping by month to month rent, or was it worth trying to start, early into my coaching career and kind of take that next step down that path?
Yeah, and that's, we know stories of people that we both mutually know where that has worked for them, or that's kind of the dream that they wanted to chase, and there's nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, there's nothing wrong, it's not a lack of belief in yourself. It's just that, you kind of realize that unless you get a lot of major luck or a lot of major breaks, you're just being very pragmatic about the situation. So from a coaching standpoint, and kind of pivoting into that, there's a lot of licensing and things like that that's involved. So can you kind of just share where your licensing is currently at with us?
Yeah, so I actually just enrolled for my U.S. Soccer C license, which will happen at more towards October, and that'll be 4 to 5 month licensing period that I'll take. So I did my grassroots courses here in Asheville, which was easy. One day, go in person, few people, ranging from volunteers to some college coaches like myself. Did that, and then after about 6 months, I enrolled in my D license course, which I did that in North Carolina, more towards the central part of the state, so down in Raleigh, but met some really wonderful people, got some unique opportunities from that. I'm still actually in contact with the instructor. And so I had to wait from that D course. You have to take a 1 year kind of gap period. It's a development period. So 1 year to kind of develop what you've learned in the D
Use
course.
The license, yeah.
Like that. Yeah. So I've taken that year, and then looking, ahead at the schedule, I realized my 1 year is just about to finish, and I started to look and think that, I want to continue, obviously, as a coach. I want to continue getting my licenses and things like that. So I took the next step, and luckily for me, I know a few people that will be in my C course, and then the youth club that I work for has, helped sponsor me in the sense to get my license, because it is, a bit expensive as you get up there.
Yeah, so you are working kind of in that youth space, and you're working in the collegiate space as well.
Yeah,
what age teams are you teaching in at the club level?
So I have an 08 boys team, which is about 7th and 8th graders, and an 06 boys team that is sophomores, mainly in high school. And that group I've been working for about two and a half years now. So I've really had that team, and then this 08 team I've just recently taken over.
Okay. What's kind of the number of kids at the club you're currently at right now, roughly?
It'd be hard to tell. They have in Asheville, there's really 2 clubs. The club I work at is mainly the bigger club, and they have from, under 9 to under 18, 2 to 3 teams in each age group on the boys side, and 1 to 2 on the girls side. If I believe correctly, I want to say there's around 50 teams on the boys side and maybe 39 to 45 on the girls side. I think you're on mute.
I am. Joe, I'll introduce you to a guest of the show today, another guest of the show. This is, come here, buddy. This is, oh my gosh, here he is. This is Dempsey, the Golden Doodle. And he's a co-host, and he's chewing stuff around my feet. So I was just like, that's why I was on mute. I was like, what the heck is he doing here? Hi, buddy. He is an official mascot of the Soccer Geeks podcast, but he's a lot of fun. But Dempsey,
mascot.
yeah, dude. I mean, who else am I going to name him after? I mean, the greatest. Actually, it was, I know you saw, but recently voted to the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame, Clint Dempsey.
Yeah, very well deserved.
Well, yeah, the only reason why I asked you is just for context, right, of clubs, because, I have never lived in North Carolina. I don't know necessarily, Asheville's a pretty big city. You just never know how many clubs are. You know what it's like coming from Southern California. You know how dense soccer populations are here. So
it was very different coming out here and getting involved in the club scene, just because obviously, I grew up in California. My whole youth career was in Southern California, ranging teams from San Diego to Santa Barbara, varying club sizes, varying levels. But here it's much different in the sense I feel like the state is dominated by a few clubs. The club I work for is definitely not on that scale yet. But in the sense in Asheville, there's really 2 clubs, but the other club only has about 8 teams total.
Wow. Okay.
So it really is. And I mean, the one club kind of dominates the area, and the next most competitive, I guess, ECNL team's about an hour and a half away.
Holy cow. Okay. So there's more travel involved.
Yes.
A lot more travel. That's what I imagine. There's less clubs, more travel. I mean, it looks like the population at Asheville is somewhere around 100,000 people. So a little bit different than growing up in Orange County for yourself. Yeah. A little bit different. Man, I think that it's very pragmatic and wonderful. And it's great how, even though while you're working on your playing career, things would, shift in one way or another. That's great. But all the while you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, and you're kind of prepping for things, which is kind of preparing you for the role that you have today. As you kind of made that transition from, player to coach and started working more on the coaching side, a couple questions I would love to ask along those lines is just, do you feel that it's more valuable to you having the extensive playing experience that you had at the collegiate level? Like, do you feel that actually is going to help you understand more from a coaching X's and O's perspective? Having known where you were in your own career and what your potential was, whether you met that or not, and all those things. But how do you feel that really helped you be a better coach today?
Yeah, 100%. I think, other than the fact that you get to play for different coaches and, good, bad, and different, whatever it is, you take things from every coach you've played for. So the longer you play, the more examples, the more role models you can have, and the more things you can take from other people. But in terms of college, I think it does help. The X's and O's, I think, you don't need that playing experience maybe necessarily, but it does help. I think it makes the transition a bit quicker, but also in terms of it helps you understand the players. Yeah. I'm younger. I've graduated from the university. Our head coach has graduated from the university. We know a bit more, about the scheduling of the school, what classes may be tougher, when they should be, loading up on their courses, how kind of the school runs in terms of the cafeteria, the dorms, maybe some more ins and outs of things that, because I went through the system myself, I can help the players that maybe they wouldn't be able to navigate quite as effectively if they didn't have somebody that, just went through it all.
Yeah, and I want to get to some of that, because it kind of seems that you've got the role not only of coach, but also like a player liaison, being an assistant coach. I mean, you're kind of there to not only be able to come alongside the head coach and execute what they want to see in a training session, but you're also there on the sidelines, and even off the field to kind of help them kind of stay on track as well. You talked about reaching out to past coaches or the influences of past coaches. And I just was wondering if you might be able to share with us, to kind of one up, one down. Like, what do you think was like the most valuable, nugget that's just kind of stuck with you? And what's the one thing that you found to be probably the worst piece of advice you've received?
That's a fantastic question. So I'm going to say maybe the worst piece of advice would be somebody told me something along the lines of, if you're naturally good enough, you'll make it. If you're not naturally good enough, you're just never going to become a good player. And I think that resonated with me a lot. because I have seen both cases. I've seen, naturally gifted players fail over and over again. And I've seen, players that I grew up with that were not nearly as naturally gifted, but hard work, perseverance, they grew into their body, they became more athletic, they put in the work, guys that are now professionals. So I think that, and I couldn't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, naturally gifted players will just always be better. And I just strongly disagree with that statement.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my daughter's coaches, even she's a 10 years old, and one of her coach, during COVID, had told the kids, that famous Alex Ferguson quote, which is, hard work beats talent when talent won't work hard. And we talk about it all the time. And I talk about that with her because she's the youngest of three girls. Her room's a flipping mess. She's like a tornado around the house. I'm like, listen, like, your sister that you think you have more flair over now, even though she's 2 years older than you, like, her career could end up being longer because she's willing to put in the work and she's willing to take care and be responsible and accountable for her actions. Whereas for you, you just hope that it'll all come together. Yeah, we've seen both of that. I this. I didn't grow up playing the game, but I grew up playing sports, and I've got friends that played in nearly every professional league in this country that I went to school with or that I've known. And there is an interesting mixture between talent and dedication. And there's also, one of those things where, I've told you this for years, right? The biggest waste in life is potential. But it's not just potential, it's applied potential. Are we actually applying that potential that's there? So that was the crappiest advice you got, and that's honestly terrible advice. Is that, well, you're just not good enough, kid. You'll never make it. What would you feel? What's the best advice that you received then?
So, I mean, maybe not the best advice ever, but on the top of my head, some of the best advice that resonated with me as a coach was, as a coach, your job is to always let a player know where they stand honestly and how they can develop honestly and what they need to do. So a coach told me, as you want to get into coaching, your job is clear communication with every player. An example is, am I telling my fourth string center back that if he does 100 push-ups a night, he's going to be the best player on the team? Or am I being honest with him that maybe he needs to drop down a level and work on these 4 aspects in order for him to develop into the player that he could be? And I think that the hardest part is obviously that honesty piece. But if you can get that right, it also makes the world of a difference.
I mean, that makes it that puts a lot of work. Some of the guests we've had on the show have talked a lot about communication from coaches to parents, like that. You're talking about the context on a club level, right? Not in the collegiate level.
Both. In the collegiate level, letting players know where they stand. So the collegiate, the rosters, range between anywhere from 26 to 35 players. How do I let players know where they stand? Am I just telling every single player at the start of the year that they're coming in to compete for a starting 11 spot? We all know that's not true. Everybody knows that at the end of the day, there's 11 players, and there's some players that, will be in that 11 just based on how they are as a player. We know that they're doing the work in the off season. We know that naturally they have a ton of talent, and they have the dedication and the passion, everything off the field to match that. But am I being honest with guy number 1, guy number 11, guy number 20, and guy number 30 on the roster, and letting them know where they stand and what my honest opinion is and how they can develop? Do I have a player that I just don't rate, that I never see playing ever, that I inherited from another coach? Do I just keep lying to him and stringing him along? Or do I let him know that, what he wants out of his playing career and his, college experience is different than what I think will happen if he stays at the university? Things of that aspect. It obviously can vary from the club level to, a semi-pro team to a collegiate team, but that honesty of how you can help players, what you think, where they fit in the roster, and what you think they need to do to either continue elevating where their ceiling is, and all that sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, communication's key. You end up dealing with a lot less fallout and problems down the road if people have access to kind of know where they stand at all times. And we're gonna kind of circle back in a few questions I have later on in the show, and I want to circle back kind of to that idea about communication and what that role looks like with parents and with kids, how early to start having conversations about pathways and things like that. So for you coming in as a coach, right, like, what do you where do you see your foundation, like from a philosophy standpoint? Like, what's Joe LaCasto's soccer philosophy? Like, what foundation and what philosophy are you trying to impose on and off the field?
Yeah, so I've thought about this a lot. Growing up, everybody thinks, about how they would play the game, right? Everybody wants to be the coach when you're on the team. And so my foundation has always been keep the ball on the floor, get on the ball, get it. Let's get expansive when we have the ball. Can we be dynamic in the attack? As I've kind of transitioned into coaching, I've kind of redefined it a little bit in the sense of, everybody wanted to be Barcelona growing up. Everybody wants to be Barcelona. But is that realistic for me, my program, the players I've have? So I've adapted towards the teams I have, but I kind of keep the same foundation that, my philosophy would be defensively, let's get very compact. Let's be hardworking, gritty, tough to break down. When we have the ball, can we be a dynamic, possession-oriented team that dominates and dictates the tempo in the attacking half? So we want to be a team that's possession, but do we want to have the ball, 80 yards from the goal, moving it at a slow tempo? Or can we get our center backs up to the midline? Can we get our outside backs high? Can we get very expansive, be very dynamic, and keep possession, but really dictate that tempo in our attacking half? And I think that's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah. How do you balance that with the players that you have in front of you?
Yeah. So, I'll be honest. One of the hardest things was, when you transition into coaching and, you want to get on a staff where you feel that you'll be valued and you can give an opinion, you're not going to take a jump into, one of the top 10 teams in the country. You're not going to be coaching the best club team in the country. So for me, that was difficult because, when I got into coaching, I came to, Asheville, and I then went on to Mars Hill University, where two programs that were really struggling. So, we were a team both teams I had weren't a team that was going to go dictate the game. We weren't going to go dominate possession. We weren't going to have 20 chances on goal each game. And, we were going to have to change the way we play. So I've really taken a lot of things from, previous coaches, but really the coaches I had at the time and people around me and bouncing ideas off them. And I've learned to become much harder defensively. I've learned to work on, our shape and being a little bit more gritty and implementing more work ethic and kind of grinding on the defensive side to then lead into the attacking side. One thing I've taken my 08 team, a team that, really struggled, and we've gone and we've played a 4-4-2, very simple, basic defending principles first to then allow us to get on the ball and go forward.
Yeah, what's funny, Joe, is that reminds me a lot of your playing career, whether you realize it or not. That you were very much a player that needed to adapt because, at the end of the day, you have the skill set that you have. And one of the things that was really so great about having you on the teams that we played on is that you were known as like the Swiss Army knife. If we needed a right back, like we knew that you understood the game to be able to play back there. If we needed a midfielder, great. If we needed you to play winger, like you knew the game from different angles, and because your soccer IQ was so high and you were really good at the fundamentals, it made it very easy for the team and the squad and the coaching staff to trust you and to be able to adapt on the fly. And so what just is really funny is that, that goes back to that question I asked earlier. What are the philosophy and the principles that you're applying? It's very much who you embodied as a player on the field. And so, I have no doubt that the teams that you're coaching, are going to be a bit of that embodiment as well, which is really good, solid, foundational, principles. And with that too, over time, that's going to lead to a lot of success. Small program, big program alone. And I've talked with guys who have, part of bigger teams, bigger programs and all that stuff. And those same challenges you're discussing at the level that you're at are the same challenges that they have, at other levels. And we see it in world football today. Is it the system or is it the players, that you tailor the system to? And so it's always a balance for coaches and for players to understand, for crying out loud, look at Chelsea, they, look at the system that the coach wants to employ and look at all the players and all that, that system that's on the bench, but they can't play 7 wingers, a game. So we see this all the time. It's just really hard when it's under our watch, and we have what we want, and then we have what we got to work with. You said growing up everybody wanted to be Barcelona, which is a little tough in a country like ours for the time and the technical ability where we were at. Where do you see in world football, coaching tactics, things like that? Where is it that you get your inspiration from of what you'd like to see emulated?
I'd say it's a very big mixture of global football and taking coaches that I've seen on television. I actually took a trip over to England and got to explore some academies, watch a few Premier League teams train, taking those ideas and just those small glimpses I've seen, what I see on TV, and guys that I've always looked up to, reading a lot of their books. I've read Sir Alex Ferguson's book, I've read Pep's and Cruyff's, and reading all those books and taking small little pieces of those people's and those obviously super successful coaches kind of philosophies, and then tailoring it a lot to role models that I've had. So I've had a lot of fantastic coaches here in the US growing up, club coaches that are now professional coaches, and some that have stayed in the youth, some fantastic people I've worked with within college and that I've just ran into along the way, but taking ideas from almost everybody that you meet and almost spinning it to how you can implement it into your own environment. There's so many role models that I had that helped me get into coaching, and that I still, ask questions on, daily, weekly, that just coaches that coached me at the youth level that now I can, interact with as a coach, and just completely, hey, I remember we did this, why did we do that? What was the goal for that? And, I use that a lot. I use a lot of role models, and I try and take bits and pieces from almost everybody that I've worked with or that I see, and just kind of go from there to form it into my own.
That kind of one of the things we talk about consistently on this show, Joe, is that the need for coaching education to get better, the need for the mindset of coaches in our country to get better. It seems that the old guard, if you will, is very reticent to give information away. It's very closed door, very closed book. There's not a lot of wisdom being passed down. It's like, well, hey, I had to cut my teeth when no one cared. Good luck cutting yours. Being a younger coach, kind of coming into it, and then obviously having the influences, but having the relationship with the generation before. It's really wonderful to hear the relationships that you've built along the way, where you have the access to those that wealth and resource of wisdom, really, of what the game's taught them. Outside of just the relationships you have, though, and books that are sitting on the bookshelf, I wonder if you are setting yourself up in the future as you're connecting with players today to also be that kind of that hub and that wealth of resource. Do you find that being common in younger coaches, or are you still seeing a lot of the principles that have guided coaching in this country over the last 50 years kind of stay the same?
I think it's a little more common for younger coaches kind of to be getting ideas from past coaches, past people they've worked with. But I also do think, the U.S. structure is a bit hard. I had to take, 3 grassroots courses before I could even apply for my D license, which is the basic license. And not that that's a problem by any means, but the resources available. I mean, it took me, about 6-7 months of searching to finally find a grassroots course that could just fit my schedule, because, the closest one's 2.5 hours away.
Right.
Well, and they're also in the middle of the college season. So how am I supposed to, miss out on a game to go 2.5 hours away just to get my grassroots course, where, well, then reflecting back, I think there could have been potential way that I could have got into the D license just based on how long I had been coaching and my playing experience. So I do find it a little bit hard. I think young coaches are a bit discouraged by the licensing. One with, the amount of little things you have to do before you can even get into, one of the real licensing periods, and also the expense. I'm fortunate enough that my club is big on coaching education. My director is fantastic. And, he watches every coach, he gives advice. He's someone that can bounce ideas off of, and they're willing to help pay for it. But other coaches, they're like, I can't pay $3,000 for licensing. That's half my fee right there from, my club team. Like, how am I supposed to go do that? And So I think that's where it's difficult for the young coaches, is just getting access to those resources. But I do think, a lot of young coaches like to bounce ideas off guys they've worked with in the past and guys that have coached them, especially, the positive role models in our life and guys that we've taken so much from.
Yep. Yeah, one of the area, I love to give praise where praise is due, right, and be critical where it's due as well. But, one of the massive failures of the Federation during, the dark medieval period that it seems that we've been in post-Cuva has been, and what I see in coaching education in this country anyways, is there simply aren't enough classes. I think that coaching education, like, if we want to have a better brand of coach and soccer and development in this country, it doesn't start with the players. It starts with coaches of the players. And nearly every person we've had on this show, Joe, has pretty much said the same thing, from whether they're players or whether they're, former coaches or current coaches or whatever the heck it would be. The Federation must do a better job of making the classes accessible, making them more affordable. And it will that's the fastest way for us to improve as a whole country. And again, like you said, just the opportunity for you as a coach to keep pursuing it. So let's pivot a little bit and kind of talk to some of those roles as an assistant coach that you've got right now. Can you share a little bit about what your job duties are? I mean, do you have any? Well, actually, just share about your job duties, and then I'll kind of see if you say where I want the conversation to go or not.
Yeah, of course. So my job duties, entail a lot of planning with the coach, what we would like to get out of training, but looking ahead, 2-week block periods and developmental periods, assisting and bringing my ideas in terms of that. On-field duties, of course, the head coach doesn't need to be running everything from a warm up to the last activity of the day. So taking some of those roles as an assistant coach, I find I can give a lot more individual feedback to certain players. So, we're doing a bigger activity where the head coach is kind of overseeing everything. Well, I can pull a player off to the side and be like, what did you think in this instance? Could maybe you look for this, how does what you do impact the team? Things of that sort, pulling them aside. And then obviously the day-to-day activities of the office, a little bit of the budgeting, the fundraising, things like that, having a lot of meetings with the players, creating, film breakdowns for players, film breakdowns for the team, and then a lot of recruiting. And, recruiting is a massive one for an assistant coach, and that obviously ties into the program, but just kind of doing a lot of the things that a head coach doesn't need to be doing and taking a lot of those minor tasks kind of off his hands.
Yeah, and that was kind of along those lines of recruiting / scouting. That was kind of where I was hoping you would hit on, because that's what I want to kind of chat about a little bit. Are you able to at least share from a application, a program standpoint, just what software you got? What do you guys use as a program for scouting?
So we use Instat a lot.
Okay.
Which is fantastic for obviously looking at professional players, and a lot of colleges. Not all the youth programs use that. So, but Instat is our big one that we use within our program. In terms of recruiting, though, we have a system called ARMS, which is specific to us in terms of players filling out questionnaires and getting them within our system for compliance and all the resources. However, there's no one platform that we use specifically when we're scouting players or recruiting them, just because it's hard with how many leagues there are here in the U.S. They don't all use the same. They don't all use the same systems. They don't all, go to the same events, things like that. And then internationally, is a big one that we recruit from. We use a lot more contacts and things. Guys that we've worked with in the past that we trust, guys that can give honest evaluations on players, that know our program, know our needs, things like that. So we're really big on using coaches, using kind of contacts that we've used in the past and guys that we trust to get honest evaluations if we don't get a chance to see them fully, or we only get to see them for half a game at one event and it turned out to be a rainy day, and they're a left back and they didn't see much of the ball, things like that.
Yeah, it's real unfortunate that the game in the country and the way that the leagues are set up and pitted against one another, that actually it proves a lot of what I've talked about in the past, that the system that we have set up right now that is tribalistic and siloed is absolutely preventing more kids in this country from getting opportunities to play soccer in collegiate and or professionally. And it's really opened the door for more international players to kind of come in and take those but I mean, hey, they have to earn the opportunity, but colleges seem more willing to take from an athletic standpoint, maybe a more technical, more developed, more accessible player outside the country, give that education, give that soccer education as well, and give those opportunities over the kids that live here or that are in the community, which is, it just nothing lights a fire under my tuchus, about stuff like that.
100%. I mean, there's leagues forming all. I actually joke with it with my boss all the time. Is there's leagues popping up every which way and leagues folding, and what sucks is when two big leagues decide, oh, we're gonna have our main showcase or our playoffs on the same date, and now you got to choose which one are you going to, which one's better location wise for us as a staff and things of that sort. But I 100% agree with what you just said.
Yeah, it's pretty damn greedy, and it's not really keeping the players' best interests at mind. It's more about keeping their own personal financial interests. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's a lot of money that goes around, and there's plenty of money for everybody to be really successful and taken care of. If we can just show a better vision of what it could be for everybody. Do you guys kind of, as a staff, I mean, how do you? What do you prioritize? Do you prioritize like the league, ECNL type season, or whatever league the kids are playing in, or do you really kind of highlight the showcases and things like that?
So a bit of both. I'd say showcases are obviously big for us in the sense of we get to go see more players. When a showcase comes and they're at a 20-field complex, we can bounce around and see, 5 or 6 guys. The leagues are also important, though, because we can see kind of individual players, especially if they are coming somewhere in close proximity to our university. We can go watch them in a full game in more of a environment that really they're comfortable in, right? Yeah. The showcases, there's travel, there's things, there's obviously players trying to get recruited by coaches. The league matches are more, they want to win the game. They're very comfortable in the environment. They know what to expect. So we use both, I would say, but obviously the showcases, you can get a wide range of players more, whereas the league matches are more when we specifically want to see somebody.
Yeah. Thinking back to your own playing career and thinking about the conversations that you're having with kids these days, when it comes to the pathway, when it comes to having a conversation, and you have this now on the college side, you had a former collegiate player, club player growing up, and now you're a club coach as well. So you're really going to be well versed, in my opinion, to answer this question once I get to it. How young do you think is old enough to have the conversation about the pathway between parents and coaches and players about college or pro? How young?
So it's obviously different for everybody. There's no blanket answer just because of development. And, I was a perfect example. I developed late in the sense of it changed maybe my trajectory a touch. But I would say, really, really around the time they get into high school, you have a good idea of where you think their career might go. And obviously things can always change, development always changes. However, I'm not the biggest fan of, 8-year-olds being put on a development and saying you're going to be a pro. Like that is your path and you have to go with it. Or, even 12-year-olds, it's still tough to tell. But when you really start to get to that high school age, you can start to tell in a sense, where they might go. Not saying, I was a player that when I went into high school, I was, for me, it would have been great to get into college and play, whether that was a Division III, Division II, Division I, wherever it was, I would have been very happy as I grew into my body a little bit more, developed a little bit more. Well, now all of a sudden, junior, senior year, I'm looking, okay, Division I is definitely my pathway. And things. So I would say that those things can change a little bit, but really I think towards high school, you're starting to see what maybe that pathway would look like, knowing that a few of those lines could be blurred a bit or changed just depending on, the work that the player does put in, and how they kind of develop a little bit more over those next few years.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point because, it's one of the things, the pathway is long. And the earlier that you start kind of having those conversations without it being set in stone, right? what we found and what the conversations that I've had, even with my own kids and with other parents, is that, and a couple other academy directors and things like that, is that the earlier that we can engage the parents in that process, that it's not, because in the United States, it's college or bust. There hasn't been a big pathway for the professional ranks. So it's college, 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 college. And the parents typically are a little bit more focused on the educational component. It's a nice thing to fall back on, to have a degree. You could end up as a coach at a wonderful university, and not be living at home till you're 35. But with that too, I've also met kids that, frankly, at 10, 11 years old, it's kind of obvious that they're on the trajectory for a professional pathway. And the parents are a little hesitant because they were always dreaming of college for their kid too. So how do we manage these things? And I've always just found it really healthy to have that conversation without it being super definitive at the younger ages. Even pre-academy ages, of just like, hey, like, did you know that college, like, you could get a scholarship and go to college, or that this might be something that you could really pursue? We see it a little bit more on the boys' side, where, they hit 16 and then, no one can really talk to them. They know everything, and it's real hard on the soccer field. I know there's a lot of college coaches and across the country, and a lot of soccer players across the country that are shaking their head yes, because they either were there or they are there, where they just kind of tune everything out and they know more. And so I just wonder if that mentorship is just, along with parents coming alongside, to kind of move from the director's seat to the counseling seat and the confidant seat, and the parental role, that could just be a really healthy environment for players as they develop.
Yeah, I think conversations are really important. Like I said earlier, I don't think it's ever too early to have a conversation with a player. Even when I took over my 06 team, 2 years ago, so that would have put them at, 7th and 8th graders. And we were going along, and I started asking a few of the boys at a showcase or a tournament, like, what do you want to get out of soccer? What do you want to get out of? I remember telling one player, that I think, college is a very realistic option for him. And, for me, it was just a simple Saturday in between games, not thinking too much. I thought it was a very fair statement. And then come back the next week, and his dad sent me a message like, hey, would you mind to talk? Like, you really piqued his interest. Like, we didn't really think this was an option.
Yeah.
But, hearing you say that, knowing you're a college coach and you've been through the level, like, we'd love to kind of look, have a conversation what that may look like. And for me, not thinking much of it, maybe a little bit naive, young, just thinking, I thought that was a pretty fair statement. I think it's definitely in his plans if he continues with the work ethic he has and the development plan I think he's on.
A lot of times in the current landscape that we have, as competitive as the club scene is, more conversations like that should happen between players and coaches, because it's one of those things, no player is really perfect, right? But everybody wants to know that somebody somewhere believes a little bit in them. And you hope for every kid in the country just to have that experience where they know that, hey, somebody believes in me, and I can do this. That little bit of self-belief. I've been having conversations with my kids since they were, ever kicked a soccer ball. I can remember, there are youth players from our country that, young girls, because, I got 3 daughters, where I've talked to them like, hey, did you know that there's a girl from surf at 15 years old, that signed a contract to go play in Sweden? And they're like, what does that mean? Like, well, she went and moved to Sweden with one of her parents. Like, would you let me do that? I was like, I'd learn how to speak Swedish. Yeah, we'd figure things out. Like, what? Like, that's amazing. Or there's a lot of kids don't even know that there's even academies where they can go do school online, and you basically you start playing soccer 6-7 days a week, and you kind of go along that pathway. And I think it's really good to let kids and parents know what options are really available out there. Not every kid gets those options, but man, it's really nice to know that there's a swath of opportunities. It's the biggest global game, and with it affords a ton of opportunities, whether that be a college coach, professional player, or someone who comes back, again, coaching at the club level or whatever that is, referee, anything like that. I think it's a really positive thing. Joe, last question. We always ask this of every guest on our show, and this wasn't on the list of questions that I put for a reason. You are given the ability to basically, put on the infinity gauntlet and make one sweeping change in the game in the country here in the United States. What change do you make that happens immediately, and to what effect?
Wow, that is a very good question.
Good. Yeah.
I will take that. I put on the Infinity Gauntlet, and the MLS becomes the Premier League of the world, the most watched league, where everybody dreams of coming to the Major League Soccer, and grows the game that way. Just because I think, you know, you start filling out stadiums, all the best players, they all want to come to America, and I think naturally that grows the youth game into what I think we would all like to see in the U.S.
Yeah. Let's just take away salary caps. That's the number one way to do it, right? Oh man, Joe, what a wonderful conversation today. Let's bring Marissa back in as we kind of round this out. And I just want to say thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Appreciate your contributions. It's so wonderful to see how you are giving back to the game and living off the game, you know, so to speak, but in a very healthy, positive way. And I think your players, whether at the club level or at the collegiate level, are lucky to have you. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and always happy to talk the game.
Heck yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
You're welcome back anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, hopefully we'll all get out to see you in Asheville, since I'm a little closer than Jason, but definitely look forward to see how your career takes off from where you're at now.
Yeah.
And believe me when I say this, Joe, well, one, if you come out to any tournaments out in the West Coast, let me know. And two, as our app continues to get developed, man, I'll make sure that I keep you on the short list of people to get a peek of it first. So I think we can help you. I think we can help you out in that scouting area massively. So looking forward to it.
That'd be very nice. Thank you.
Of course, buddy. Enjoy your day.
Great.
Thanks again.
Have a good one.